An urgent meeting of the United Nations Security Council will take place. It took place yesterday after North Korea launched what they claim to be a satellite into orbit. The council deciding that new sanctions are on the way in response to what critics fear is really a ballistic missile test. Even Russia condemned the act as a violation of international law. We want to bring in former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and former New Mexico governor Bill Richardson, who spent time in North Korea and negotiating with North Korea in the past. Sir, good to have you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Maria.
What's your take on this action out of North Korea this weekend?
Well, I think the new leader, who we know very little about, is showing defiance. He seems to be internally strained. In other words, he feels he has to solidify his internal situation with these acts of enormous idiocy, I think, because it just isolates him further. I think we've got to take some action at the UN, some banking sanctions. Those still haven't been imposed. We have to consider with South Korea ballistic missile defense of some kind, simply because of the unpredictability of this man. We don't know what he wants. We don't know what he's doing. We know that he's becoming very dangerous.
So what would you expect that to take place? So you think the UN perhaps should be imposing financial sanctions against North Korea right now?
That's right. The ones that used to bite the most in the past were banking sanctions aimed at the leadership of North Korea whenever they wanted to move their money or travel. That worked in the Bush administration in the past. Now, the danger there is that Russia or China would veto that. I worry that China might veto that because of their very close relationship. This is also complicated, Maria, by China has leverage over North Korea, but they don't seem to want to use it. They want to seem to have these problems of North Korea and the region, Japan, South Korea, be present to keep us in bad shape in the region.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Ambassador, that's what I was going to raise that same question to you, which is there any way to get the Chinese to move on this, or is this just, at this point, it's been almost really 20 years, even with different regimes, is this just a problem that has to be managed, or is there something that propels a change here with the Chinese?
Well, I think the Chinese like the situation to be troublesome for us, for South Korea, for Japan. The fear is that if North Korea collapses, that a bunch of refugees go into China. But I think they've decided that they're not going to pressure North Korea to the point where North Korea starts behaving. They're the only ones with leverage. They give them food, humanitarian assistance, energy assistance, but they don't want to use that leverage. And we don't have much leverage over China, neither does the region. So it's a geopolitical move by China to keep North Korea strong and not leveraged and not pushing him to be much more responsible.
Ambassador, is also the situation complicated, further complicated by our new deal on nukes with Iran, given Iran's long-standing relationship with North Korea?
No, I don't think it's complicated. There is a long-standing relationship. In fact, the worry I have is North Korea puts out a lot of nuclear materials to countries like Syria, Pakistan, Iran. I think what North Korea is saying, we're not going to make a deal with you like you did with Iran. It's going to cost you a lot more. But I think eventually North Korea is going to look back and say, look, we're starving, we're in bad shape, we're ready, if you give us food, fuel, take sanctions off, to maybe curb our nuclear weapons, curb them, not end them. A similar deal with Iran, I think, perhaps years away, is very possible. With this new leader, though, Kim Jong-un, nobody knows him, nobody knows what makes him tick. He seems to be internally trying to solidify himself, and he's unpredictable. So we're up against an enigma.
Is there anybody in terms of the candidates who understands this better than others? I mean, I want to turn to the election for a second, Ambassador, because Bernie Sanders is still way out in front in most New Hampshire polls. Is the Clinton camp concerned at this point?
Yeah, well, I'm not talking to them. I support Hillary Clinton, but she knows foreign policy. She's dealt with North Korea before. Interestingly, Governor Kasich called me because one of his constituents was apprehended in North Korea, that young man from Ohio University of Virginia, and we talked a little bit about North Korea. I served with John in the Congress. Now, I don't want to endorse him because it's going to hurt him in New Hampshire, but, he knows foreign policy, and I think Hillary Clinton knows foreign policy.
There was talk, Ambassador, in the debate Saturday night about a preemptive strike to take out a missile from some of the candidates. And I wanted to get your take on that and sort of ask more broadly, is the United States too cautious? I mean, whether you agree with that policy or not, is there a more forceful action that the United States could or should be considering here?
No, I think a preemptive strike would really be a tinderbox explosion that would bring in South Korea, possibly even Japan, an altercation between the U.S. and South Korea. We've got close to 30,000 American troops. I think the first measure is sanctions, is possibly a missile defense with South Korea. We're considering that in Eastern Europe. I think that's a step we should consider now because this man, Kim Jong-un, is totally unpredictable. You don't know what he's going to do next. And, maybe he doesn't want to dialogue with the West. Maybe he wants to stay isolated. Who knows? Nobody knows.
So what do you think about the election right now, Governor? Let's switch gears for a second. I mean, is it surprising to you that Bernie Sanders is doing as well as he is?
Yeah, I thought that he would not be as strong. I think it shows the strength of the liberal progressive wing in the Democratic Party. But I think after New Hampshire, Iowa, New Hampshire, I was in those primaries. I didn't do too well, but I know that they are not representative of the entire American population. I think when you get into South Carolina, Nevada, more minority voters, labor unions, where Hillary Clinton's going to be strong. But I think you are seeing in New Hampshire, a neighbor state of Vermont, I think Sanders will win it, but it could be closer. I think Hillary Clinton's tactic would be to make it reasonably close so it doesn't look like a stunning defeat. And I think she's going to achieve that. The Clintons always have done well in New Hampshire, and I don't see necessarily that changing. She will lose it, but it will be a respectable loss. Then she moves on to the other primaries with the Democratic base, and I think she's going to be the Democratic nominee.
Well, what about Trump? I mean, similar reason for Trump doing so well, this outrage on the part of America looking to the outliers.
Well, there's no question that, I've, again, been wrong about Trump. I thought he was going to flame out early, but he obviously has touched an angry base that is supporting him. What I know New Hampshire does is they send messages. 40% of that vote is close to that is independents that can vote either way.
Right.
I see John Kasich is surging. And I think the message is going to be one in the Democratic side and one on the Republican side. And I think a moderate establishment candidate, either of the three governors, and I'm partial to governors, are going to do better than expected.
Yep. Governor, good to have you on the program. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. Bill Richardson joining us. Another story.